Your upbringing in County Clare has been a central influence in all your writing. What are the most vivid impressions you remember from that period?
Well, I think it's all vivid. I mean, I remember every second of it. And it's very strange how, in what I call my present life, I am haunted by still life images, frozen images of both things I see and things I saw and things I heard. I mean, as you ask me now, I might think differently in 5 minutes' time. What I was so beautiful was the outside, that strange, almost, it was like a theatre, that world of trees and raggedness, and the moon still in the sky when we were going to school in the morning. You know, the sun was coming, or should be coming up, and the moon and frost. And I have an incredible love for that. I suppose it's nature, but it's more than nature. It's more than scenery. It's as if it were part of me. And then along with that, the people in our household, my mother and father and brother and sisters and a workman, and people in the gate lodge and people who came to save hay. I can, I have them all in me like a sheaf, things they said, and their strange mixture of good nature and savagery. Do you know? I mean, at the time, the nicknames people had. There was a man with a strawberry face. He was called the nigger. There was a man called the dagger because he had a nose, that jutted out like that. And in that time, when I was a child, I remember hearing of the blue shirts and having no idea what the significance of the blue shirts. I mean, I just wanted to say to my mother, couldn't I have a blue shirt? And then and we had the wireless, and the wet and the dry batteries were, of course, a major problem, because when the wet one was charged, the dry one had gone, vice versa. Yeah. And when ours wasn't working, we would go at night. My father would go, and he's a very tall man, he's a very good walker. And I always wanted to be very tall and be a very good walker, to keep up with him. And we would go to hear, I mean, the only things I can remember are Lord Ho-Ho, Germany calling, Germany calling. Again, I thought he was a hero, and the abdication of the King of England because of Mrs. Simpson. And what is so odd about memory is that it's all jumbled in together. I mean, I have no idea. I know sort of that the war began because my mother was trying to get some tea that she would hoard a bit, and we got a sack of white flour, and a mouse jumped out of it. And what I'm not ashamed of, but what I find odd is that political major events in the world were mirrored or cornered for me in these tiny sort of detached incidents, And one day I went to see in Amsterdam the house of Anne Frank, and there was writing on the wall and all the things, she had been interned in this room for so long. And I was crying at that time, which I wouldn't now. I was crying really with guilt that my upsets, if I can call them that, and the grief of my life was all what I call domestic, that it wasn't political, as I then thought. What I think now is that everything is political. I mean, not being in a Jewish concentration camp, but being in Ireland, getting rationed tea, is a political, because it's part of one's environment and part of one's history.
Yes.
And I live in London, as you know, and it is strange how sometimes I actually hear dogs barking, at night, how they bark from one farm to another, or I can hear wind, or I can be back there, and it is not simply memory, it's resensation, as I suppose Proust really wrote about.
I think it would be true, surely, to say that, that parish became your universe as a writer. And this is true of many writers, I think.
Well, the only thing a writer has, the only thing anyone has, really, is his experience, no matter how cockeyed or fantasized it is. And what is true, what I now know, I would not want to have come from any place else, despite certain inconveniences, which I haven't omitted to remember. Because one of the things I miss living in the city, in London, is the total... I don't know other people. I mean, I meet them. I sit down to dinner next to them, and they say, did you enjoy so-and-so? Or what do you think of the latest Gallup poll? Rubbish, really. Because when I lived in Ireland, And still, it's the same for my mother. I know everything that's going on, and not just the outside events like who has their hay saved, but there was one time when I was young, a woman used to come and visit us every Sunday with her children. She would come just before lunchtime, and of course she had to have lunch, as you can imagine. And she would say, I have my roast now for Monday, And that thing of pure narrative, which you never get in a city because people are very cloaked from each other and the manners are different. I mean, I find myself that I am different. When I'm in London, I'm more afraid, really, of exposing myself. Whereas when I'm in Clare, I have to expose myself because exposure is part of it, really.
I'm wondering, during that period, can you remember any specific time when you knew with certainty that you were born to be a writer and that this was your material around you?
Well, I didn't call it a writer because I wouldn't, I didn't know, but I had an incredible ailment, which was of always talking to myself or talking to inanimate objects, trees and stones and that. And I found that to escape or soften the kind of reality, which was rough enough, it's always rough for everyone, I fabricated or invented far more exotic and other kind of lives. I wrote a little novel, which I wish I had for fun, of a blacksmith hammering away and, very black and not debauched, but drinking. And his daughter, of course, lovely lyric heroine, the usual. And some gypsies coming in a great rush to this village and having their horses shod. And as you can, the story is not very surprising. The daughter going briefly with the gypsies and being pursued by her father. And everything that I read, at school we had little extracts from all sorts of books and Leigh Hunt's essays and Thoreau's Walden, all that. Everything I read seemed to me to be a living thing. I didn't think of stories, and I still don't, to tell you the truth, as being fiction. I think of them as being life, really. And the odd thing about words, as I get older more and more, I think of the word, say, raven, or azure, or wine, or any word, a simple word like table, that it's not simply T-A-B-L-E, table, that it is rather like a flower. And the longer you look into a flower, the centre of a flower, say a daisy or a sunflower with its little nodule, the more you really think of azure, that you can actually, it means many things. It has echoes, and I think even then